The harsh fluorescent lights of Thera 7 orbital station flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the sterile corridors of the distribution level. Arya Solen wiped the sweat from her brow as she adjusted the atmospheric regulation settings on her tablet. The reading showed concerning levels of crystal sludge particles. Again, this was the third time this week the filtration system had struggled to maintain breathable air. "Override code Solen Echo 7, she muttered into her comm device, authorizing yet another maintenance cycle. The orbital station, perched precariously at the edge of the dead belt in the Inari galaxy, creaked and groaned in response, as if expressing its own exhaustion. Thera 7 had never been designed for long-term habitation. Originally constructed as an automated supply depot for mining crews and small-time pirates navigating the treacherous crystal belts, it had evolved into a reluctant home for several hundred souls. As the ecological engineer and small-scale ration distribution specialist, Arya shouldered the burden of keeping everyone alive, a task growing more difficult by the day. Her tablet pinged with an alert. Scheduled inventory check. Lower distribution bay. She sighed, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The lower distribution bay was among her least favorite places on the station. Dark, damp, and perpetually cold. But duty called, especially when rations were running dangerously low. The supply freighter was already 3 weeks late. Whispers around the station suggested it might have been intercepted by raptorine hunters in the outer crystal belt. Those vicious avian predators were growing increasingly bold in their raids. Not that station management would ever admit to such a security breach. They preferred to maintain the illusion of control, even as systems failed around them. Arya's boots echoed against the metal grating as she descended deeper into the station's bowels. The humidity increased with each level, a byproduct of the condensation from the life support systems. Her white uniform, marked with the green stripe of the ecological division, clung uncomfortably to her skin. Temperature at 17 degrees Celsius, humidity at 73%. She noted for her daily log. Crystal sludge concentration in atmospheric circulation, 4 parts per million. Acceptable, but approaching warning threshold. The doors to the lower distribution bay hissed open, revealing rows of mostly empty storage containers. Arya methodically began her inventory, scanning each container and logging its contents in her tablet. Rice substitute, 2 kilograms. Synthetic protein cubes, 17 units. Purified water, 42 liters. Nutritional supplements, 23 vials. Not nearly enough for the station's population, even with strict rationing. They had perhaps a week before critical shortages would force emergency protocols. A faint noise caught her attention. A wet, dragging sound coming from behind the water purification tanks. Arya froze, her hand instinctively moving to the small utility knife at her belt. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all station personnel were permitted to carry. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is a restricted area." The dragging sound continued, followed by a low, rumbling groan that sent chills down her spine. That wasn't human. Protocol dictated immediate notification of security in the event of an unknown presence. But Arya hesitated, her curiosity outweighing her training. Slowly, she edged around the water tanks, tablet clutched against her chest. What she saw made her gasp audibly. Sprawled across the floor was an enormous Kradrax, one of the feared apex creatures that inhabited the crystal belts. Its massive form, easily 3 times her size, was a nightmarish blend of crystalline scales and viscous sludge. But this wasn't the fearsome predator of station warnings and spacer tales. This creature was gravely injured. A jagged crystal shard embedded deep in its side, leaking a phosphorescent blue fluid that pooled beneath it. The Kradrax's 6 eyes, usually a brilliant amber according to the biological records, were dulled to a faint glow. Its breathing came in labored, shallow gasps, each one producing a faint mist of crystal particles. Arya's mind raced. Standing before her was one of the most dangerous creatures in the sector, a predator that had been known to tear through ship hulls and devour entire mining crews. Station protocols were absolutely clear. Any apex creature sighting must be reported immediately, followed by evacuation and extermination procedures. And yet, the creature looked directly at her, its gaze carrying an unmistakable emotion that transcended species barriers. Pain. Deep, excruciating pain. "You're dying," Arya whispered, the realization hitting her with unexpected force. The creature made no threatening moves, merely continuing its labored breathing. She should call security. She should follow protocol. She should. Instead, Arya found herself kneeling beside her supply bag, removing her personal ration pack, the last one she had reserved for herself. With trembling hands, she opened the package of modified crystal fungi porridge, the staple diet of station personnel. "I must be insane," she muttered, slowly approaching the wounded Kradrax. "This is absolutely against every regulation in the book." The creature's eyes tracked her movement, but it made no attempt to attack or flee, likely too weak for either. Carefully, Arya placed the ration pack within reach of what appeared to be its mouth, a complex arrangement of crystalline mandibles. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, with agonizing slowness, the Kradrax extended a slime-covered appendage and drew the food toward its mouth. The consumption was almost delicate, entirely at odds with the creature's fearsome reputation. Arya's comm device buzzed insistently. "Solen, inventory status?" The clipped voice of the distribution director echoed in the cavernous space. She jumped, fumbling with the device. "Nearly complete, Director. Minor delay due to..." She glanced at the wounded creature. "System calibration issues. We'll report in 30 minutes. "Make it 15, came the curt reply before the comm went silent. Arya looked back at the Kradrax, which had finished her ration and was watching her with what seemed like renewed interest. The rational part of her brain screamed at her to leave, to report the security breach, to follow years of training and protocol. Instead, she reached for her water canister, her last personal supply until the next distribution cycle. "I hope you appreciate this," she said, pouring the purified water into a shallow depression in the floor near the creature. "Because I'm pretty sure this counts as treason." The Kradrax extended another appendage toward the water, absorbing it through what appeared to be semi-permeable membranes. As it did so, a faint luminescence rippled across its body, a sign of biological activity that Arya recognized from her xenobiology studies. She knew she couldn't leave it here. Security performed regular sweeps of the distribution level, and the creature would be discovered within hours. And yet, where could she possibly hide something so large? A plan began to form in her mind, reckless, potentially suicidal, but the only option if she was committed to saving this creature. There was an abandoned weapons storage compartment on Maintenance Level 3, sealed off after an accident years ago. Few people remembered it existed, and fewer still had the override codes to access it. "If I help you," Arya said softly to the Kradrax, "you can't eat me. That's the deal." The creature blinked its 6 eyes in what she chose to interpret as agreement. "I'm going to call you Bran," she decided suddenly. "You need a name if we're going to be conspirators." 15 minutes later, Arya had completed her inventory report, carefully omitting any mention of the Kradrax. Now came the hard part, moving a wounded apex creature through the station without being detected. She returned to the lower distribution bay with a maintenance cart, the largest she could requisition without raising suspicions. The Kradrax, Bran, remained where she'd left it, though its breathing seemed slightly less labored. "We need to move you," Arya explained, feeling slightly ridiculous for talking to the creature as if it could understand her. "This cart isn't big enough, but if you can pull yourself onto it, even partially, I can help guide you to somewhere safer." To her astonishment, the Kradrax seemed to comprehend. With visible effort, it began to contract its massive body, drawing its appendages inward and reducing its visible mass by nearly half, a defensive adaptation she hadn't known the species possessed. Even in this compressed state, it barely fit on the cart, with portions of its sludge-like body dripping over the edges. Arya covered it with tarp material from the maintenance supplies, creating the illusion of equipment being transported. "Stay absolutely still," she instructed, before pushing the cart toward the service elevator. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was certain anyone passing would hear it. The journey to maintenance level 3 was the longest 15 minutes of Arya's life. Twice they passed station personnel who gave the cart curious glances, but asked no questions. The respiration cycle of the Kradrax beneath the tarp created subtle movements that Arya tried to disguise by intentionally steering the cart over uneven flooring sections. Finally, they reached the sealed weapons compartment. Arya punched in her override code, a privilege of her ecological engineer status that allowed her access to all environmental systems, including decommissioned areas. Authorization: Solen, Arya, Ecological Division, Override Delta 79er. The door slid open with a reluctant groan, revealing a dusty, forgotten space, roughly 20 meters square. Ancient weapon racks lined the walls, long since stripped of anything useful. The air was stale but breathable, with minimal crystal sludge contamination, perfect for a temporary hideout. "Home sweet home," Arya murmured, pushing the cart inside and securing the door behind them. She pulled away the tarp, allowing the Kradrax to expand back to its natural size. At least for now. The creature slithered off the cart, its movements still pained but more controlled than before. It explored the space with methodical curiosity, appendages gently probing the walls and floor. Arya watched, fascinated despite her exhaustion. She'd just violated at least 7 major station protocols, risked her position, possibly her life, for a creature that most would consider a monster. And yet, observing the Kradrax as it examined its new surroundings, she couldn't bring herself to regret the decision. The crystal shard in its side still glinted menacingly. However, that would need to be addressed if the creature had any hope of survival. "I need to remove that," she said, pointing to the shard. "It's going to hurt, but it's necessary." The Kradrax stilled, its 6 eyes focusing on her with unnerving intensity. After a moment, it shifted position, presenting the injured side more prominently, an unmistakable gesture of consent. Arya approached cautiously, pulling medical supplies from her bag. She had basic first aid training, but nothing specific to Kradrax physiology. Still, certain principles were universal: remove foreign objects, clean the wound, prevent infection. "I'm going to count to 3, she told the creature, positioning her hands on either side of the crystal shard. "Then I'll pull. 1, 2, 3. She yanked the shard free in one fluid motion. The Kradrax emitted a high-pitched keening sound that made her ears ring. But it didn't lash out. Instead, it trembled violently, more phosphorescent fluid gushing from the wound. Working quickly, Arya applied pressure with sterile pads, surprised to find the fluid already beginning to coagulate. The Kradrax's natural healing abilities were accelerating now that the foreign object was removed. "You're tougher than you look," she murmured, applying a makeshift bandage from the supplies she'd brought. "But you'll still need time to recover." Her comm device buzzed again. "Solen, report to upper distribution for evening ration allocation." Arya sighed. She couldn't stay with the creature all night, not without raising suspicions. "I'll be back," she promised, gathering her things. "Try not to make any noise, okay? No one comes here, but we can't take chances." The Kradrax watched her leave, its eyes following her, until the door closed between them. The evening ration distribution passed in a blur of automation. Arya mechanically scanned IDs, dispensed the meager portions, and recorded the transactions in the station database. Her mind remained in the abandoned weapons compartment, with the wounded apex creature she'd just risked everything to save. When her shift finally ended, she managed to discreetly secure a few additional rations, not enough to trigger inventory flags, but sufficient to help sustain the Kradrax until it could heal and, hopefully, find its way back to its natural habitat. As she made her way back to the maintenance level, a voice called out from behind her. "Working late again, Solen?" Arya froze, then turned to face Station Security Officer Marcos, his imposing frame blocking the corridor. "Just some environmental readings that need monitoring," she lied smoothly. "Crystal sludge levels in the recycling systems." Officer Marcos raised an eyebrow. "At this hour? Must be important." "Crystal sludge doesn't sleep. So neither do I," she replied with a forced smile. "The concentration has been rising in Sector 4. I'm concerned about filtration overload." He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Don't work too hard. We're all replaceable on this station." The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on Arya. "Noted, officer." She watched him continue his patrol before resuming her journey, heart hammering in her chest. That had been too close. She would need to be more careful, create legitimate reasons for her movements, establish patterns that wouldn't raise suspicions. When she finally reached the weapons compartment, she found the Kradrax curled in a corner, its body emitting a soft, pulsating glow. It uncurled slightly as she entered, acknowledging her presence. "Brought you dinner," Arya said, placing the extra rations on the floor. "It's not much, but it should help." The creature approached the food with more energy than before, consuming it quickly, but still with that unexpected delicacy she'd noticed earlier. The wound in its side was already showing signs of healing, the edges knitting together with crystalline formations. Arya settled on the floor nearby, tablet in hand, and began researching Kradrax biology. The station's database contained limited information, mostly warnings about their aggressive nature and territorial behaviors. But there were also notes on their ecosystem role, apex predators that maintained the crystal belt's delicate balance by controlling the population of smaller crystal-feeding organisms. "You're not just a mindless monster, are you?" she murmured, glancing up at Bran. "You're a necessary part of the system." The Kradrax had finished eating and was now watching her with what seemed like curiosity. It extended an appendage toward her tablet, stopping just short of touching the screen. Arya blinked in surprise. "Are you interested in what I'm reading?" The creature made a soft rumbling sound, its body luminescence intensifying slightly. On impulse, she turned the tablet toward it, displaying an image of a Kradrax in its natural habitat. "This is you. Or, well, one of your kind." Bran studied the image, then extended another appendage, creating a pattern of lights across its body that roughly mimicked the shape shown on the screen. Arya gasped. "You can communicate!" Over the next several hours, Arya discovered that while the Kradrax couldn't speak, it was far from unintelligent. Through a combination of luminescent patterns, body postures, and simple gestures, Bran conveyed information about itself and its species. She learned that it had been injured while fleeing from raptorine hunters, the vicious avian predators that competed with Kradrax for territory in the crystal belts. The raptorine had been expanding their hunting grounds, pushing many Kradrax from their traditional territories. Bran had been separated from its pod, the familial group that Kradrax typically lived in, during an attack. "So you're alone too," Arya said softly. "Like me." The creature emitted a gentle pulse of light that somehow conveyed agreement. "I came to Thera 7 3 years ago," she found herself explaining. "Ecological engineering position, good pay, steady work. Except the supply lines started failing. The crystal sludge contamination got worse. And now, we're all just trying to survive until the next freighter arrives. If it arrives." Bran extended an appendage, touching the floor near her hand. not quite making contact, but close enough to suggest solidarity. "We should both get some rest," Arya said, checking the time. "I have early shift tomorrow, and you need to heal." She arranged a makeshift bed from spare maintenance materials, settling in for what would likely be an uncomfortable night's sleep. The Kradrax curled nearby, its body luminescence dimming to a soft glow that actually provided a comforting nightlight in the otherwise dark compartment. As Arya drifted toward sleep, a strange thought occurred to her. For the first time since arriving on Thera 7, she didn't feel completely alone. Morning arrived with the artificial lighting shift of the station, accompanied by Arya's alarm. She stirred, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings, before remembering the events of the previous day. The Kradrax, Bran, was still curled in the corner, its breathing deep and regular. Arya approached cautiously, checking its wound. The healing had progressed remarkably overnight, crystalline structures having formed a protective lattice over the injury. The creature stirred at her touch, eyes opening to regard her sleepily. "I have to go," she explained, gathering her things. "Duty calls, but I'll be back later with more food." Bran made a soft rumbling sound that she chose to interpret as acknowledgement. "Stay quiet, stay hidden," she instructed, before slipping out of the compartment and securing it behind her. The day passed in a haze of routine tasks and anxiety. Arya performed her regular duties, monitoring environmental systems, adjusting filtration parameters, distributing the morning ration allocation, all while her thoughts remained with the hidden Kradrax. Each time her comm device buzzed, she tensed, expecting to hear that an apex creature had been discovered on the station. But no alarm sounded. No security alerts flashed across her tablet. By midday, she had almost convinced herself that her secret was safe. Then came the announcement that chilled her blood. "Attention all personnel." The station's automated system intoned. "Increased Raptorine activity detected in Sector 7 of the Crystal Belt. All external operations suspended. Security alert level raised to orange. Repeat. Security alert level raised to orange." Arya's hands trembled as she continued adjusting the atmospheric regulators. Raptorine near the station could only mean one thing. They were hunting. And if they had tracked Bran to Thera 7, she needed to warn the Kradrax. But her shift wouldn't end for hours. Fabricating an emergency would only draw unwanted attention. She would have to wait, however agonizing that might be. When she finally reached the weapons compartment that evening, she found Bran in an agitated state, its body rippling with patterns of light, and its appendages restlessly exploring the confines of the room. "You know they're out there, don't you?" Arya said, setting down the food she'd brought. "The Raptorine." The Kradrax emitted a series of rapid light pulses, confirmation, and what she interpreted as anxiety. "The station's on alert. But they don't know you're here," she assured it. "We just need to keep you hidden until you're fully healed. And then—" She paused, realizing she hadn't thought that far ahead. "Then we'll figure something out." Bran approached her, its movements more fluid and confident than the day before. The wound had almost completely sealed over, though the creature still favored that side when moving. Through their developing system of communication, the Kradrax conveyed its history with the Raptorine, a long-standing territorial conflict exacerbated by competition for the valuable crystal resources both species utilized. The Raptorine were especially ruthless, known to target Kradrax young, which had nearly decimated Bran's pod during their last encounter. "No wonder you hate them," Arya murmured. "They destroyed your family." The creature's luminescence dimmed, a gesture she had come to recognize as sadness or regret. "I lost my family too," she found herself saying. "Not to predators, but to distance. They're back in the central systems, and communication beyond the dead belt is unreliable at best." They shared a moment of understanding, two beings from vastly different species, united by isolation and loss. The moment was shattered by the sudden blaring of alarms. "Security alert!" Unauthorized access detected in Maintenance Level 3. All personnel report to designated safe zones. Security teams converge on Sector 4B. Arya's blood ran cold. "They know," she whispered. "Someone must have seen me coming here." The Kradrax's body tensed, light patterns shifting to what she recognized as a defensive posture. "No," she said firmly. "You can't fight them. You're still not at full strength, and they'll kill you without hesitation." She glanced around frantically, searching for options. The weapons compartment had only one entrance. No ventilation shafts large enough for the Kradrax to escape through. No hidden passages. "We need to reason with them," she decided, though the prospect seemed hopeless. "I'll try to explain." The door mechanism engaged before she could finish her sentence. Arya positioned herself between Bran and the entrance, heart hammering against her ribs. The door slid open to reveal two armored security officers, weapons drawn and aimed directly at her. "Step aside, Solen," ordered the lead officer, his voice distorted by his helmet speaker. "We know about the apex creature." Arya stood her ground. "It's injured. It's not a threat. Please, just listen. Final warning. Step aside or be treated as hostile." She could feel Bran shifting behind her, its body tensing for combat despite its weakened state. "If you kill it," she argued desperately, "you disrupt the entire Crystal Belt ecosystem. We're already facing critical resource shortages. This could make everything worse." The officers advanced a step. "Not our problem. Our job is station security. That thing is a Class 1 threat." "It has a name," Arya insisted. "It's Bran, and it hasn't harmed anyone." "Move, now." "No." The lead officer signaled to his partner, who raised his weapon and fired, not at the Kradrax, but at Arya. A stun pulse hit her squarely in the chest, sending her crumpling to the floor, conscious but immobilized. From her position on the ground, she watched in horror as the officers advanced on Bran. Weapons, charged for a lethal shot. What happened next occurred so quickly that Arya's stunned brain could barely process it. The Kradrax, seemingly drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't realized it possessed, emitted a high-pitched keening sound. Simultaneously, its body expanded explosively, releasing a cloud of crystal sludge particles directly at the officers. The particles adhered to their armor, rapidly crystallizing into a restricting lattice that immobilized them more effectively than any restraints could have. Their weapons discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as they struggled against the suddenly rigid joints of their suits. "What the—" The lead officer's curse was cut short as the crystallization reached his helmet, temporarily sealing his communication systems. Arya felt the paralysis from the stun pulse beginning to wear off. With tremendous effort, she pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet, using the wall for support. "Bran," she gasped, "how did you—" The creature was clearly exhausted by the exertion, its body luminescence dim to barely visible levels. It slumped against the far wall, appendages trembling. The security officers continued to struggle against their crystallized armor, but the material held firm. "You need to get out of here," Arya told the Kradrax urgently. "Once they report back, they'll send more officers, heavier weapons." Bran's light patterns conveyed reluctance, concern. "I'll be okay," she assured it, though she had no idea if that was true. "But you need to—" Her words were drowned out by a new alarm, different in tone and urgency from the security alert. "Perimeter breach detected. Raptorine craft approaching Docking Bay 3. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The timing couldn't be worse. The station was under attack from outside, while internally, they had a security crisis involving an apex creature. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to create the perfect storm. One of the security officers managed to partially free his arm, reaching for his comm device. "Command, this is Team Alpha. We have a situation in Maintenance Level 3. Request immediate." His transmission was cut short by another burst of crystal particles from Bran, reinforcing the crystalline restraints. They tracked you here, Arya realized with dawning horror. The Raptorine. They followed your trail somehow. The Kradrax's light patterns confirmed her suspicion, adding what she interpreted as regret and determination. A new voice came over the station-wide comm system. The distribution director, Valeria Knox. All non-essential personnel evacuate to intersections. Security teams to external docking rings. Raptorine craft attempting forced entry at multiple points. Arya's mind raced. The Raptorine weren't just opportunistic hunters. They were intelligent, coordinated predators. If they had tracked Bran to the station, they wouldn't leave without their prey. And they wouldn't hesitate to tear Thera 7 apart in the process. We need to move, she decided. Her paralysis now almost completely faded. Not to hide, to fight. The Kradrax tilted its massive head, light patterns questioning. The Raptorine want you? Arya explained, already moving toward the door. If we can use that, maybe we can draw them away from the station. But we need to get to an area where you have the advantage. The creature considered this, then straightened, its body luminescence brightening with what she took to be resolve. Can you move? She asked. In response, Bran glided forward with surprising grace, its earlier weakness seemingly forgotten in the face of the new threat. Good, follow me. Leaving the immobilized security officers behind, Arya led the Kradrax through the maintenance corridors, avoiding the main passageways, where they would certainly be spotted. Her destination was the humidity control chamber, a massive room where the station's water was processed and recycled, creating an environment of near-constant moisture. If the Kradrax biology information in the database was accurate, such conditions would enhance Bran's natural abilities. As they moved through the dimly lit service tunnels, the sounds of conflict echoed through the station. Weapon discharges, metal tearing, distant shouting. The Raptorine attack was well underway. They were halfway to the humidity chamber when a section of ceiling collapsed ahead of them, bringing with it a scene straight from a nightmare. A Raptorine warrior crashed through the breach, its avian form a terrifying blend of predatory bird and cybernetic enhancements. Standing nearly as tall as the Kradrax but more vertically oriented, its body was covered in iridescent feathers that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Razor-sharp talons extended from its feet, while its wings housed concealed weaponry. But most frightening was its face, a hooked beak surrounded by sensory apparatus, giving it the appearance of wearing a grotesque mask. The Raptorine's head swiveled toward them, multifaceted eyes glittering with recognition and predatory intent. It emitted a high-pitched screech that Arya felt in her bones. "Run!" she shouted, pushing Bran toward a side passage. The creature needed no encouragement. It surged forward with unexpected speed, Arya struggling to keep pace. Behind them, the Raptorine launched into pursuit, its talons screeching against the metal flooring as it gave chase. They burst into a wider corridor, startling a group of station personnel fleeing in the opposite direction. Screams erupted at the sight of not one, but two apex creatures, followed by panic as people scattered in all directions. "Keep going," Arya urged the Kradrax, pointing toward the access hatch that would lead them to the humidity chamber. "Almost there!" The Raptorine was gaining on them, its evolutionary adaptations making it the superior sprinter. It launched itself forward in a powerful leap, talons extended toward Bran's trailing appendages. Without thinking, Arya grabbed a loose piece of piping from a damaged wall section and swung it with all her strength. The improvised weapon connected with the Raptorine's outstretched leg, disrupting its attack and sending it crashing into a nearby console in an explosion of sparks. The momentary advantage was all they needed. They reached the access hatch, Arya frantically inputting her override code. Authorization, Selene, Arya. Ecological Division, Override Delta 79er. The hatch slid open, revealing the vast, misty expanse of the humidity chamber beyond. Massive tanks and processing units created a labyrinthine environment, perpetually shrouded in a fine mist as water vapor was extracted, purified, and redistributed throughout the station. Arya and Bran tumbled through the hatch just as the Raptorine recovered, its screech of rage echoing behind them. The hatch sealed automatically, but it wouldn't hold for long against a determined predator. "This way," Arya gasped, leading Bran deeper into the chamber. "The environment here should give you an advantage. The moisture will enhance your abilities, while limiting the Raptorine's mobility." The Kradrax's body was already responding to the humid atmosphere, its crystalline components glistening with condensation, its movements becoming more fluid and powerful. The light patterns across its body intensified, shifting into configurations Arya hadn't seen before. Behind them, the access hatch exploded inward as the Raptorine forced its way through. It paused at the entrance, head swiveling as it adjusted to the misty environment, then continued its pursuit, though with noticeably more caution. Arya led Bran to the center of the chamber, where the largest processing unit created a circular clearing amid the machinery. "Here," she said. "We make our stand here." The Kradrax positioned itself beside her, its body luminescence pulsating with readiness. Through their rudimentary communication, it conveyed a simple message: "Stay behind me." Arya nodded, retreating to the shelter of a nearby purification console. The Raptorine emerged from the mist like a specter, its feathers slick with moisture, eyes gleaming with predatory focus. It was not alone. Two more of its kind flanked it, smaller, but no less deadly, their movements coordinated with practiced precision. The lead Raptorine, larger and bearing distinctive scarring across its chest plate, stepped forward, emitting a series of clicks and whistles that Arya somehow knew were a taunt directed at Bran. The Kradrax responded with a display of luminescence that rippled across its body like liquid fire. Its posture shifted. Appendages spread wide in what was unmistakably a challenge display. For a moment, predator and prey regarded each other across the clearing, ancient enemies locked in a contest as old as their species. Then, with explosive simultaneity, they attacked. The lead Raptorine launched itself airborne, wings extended to their full span, talons aimed at the Kradrax's vulnerable eyes. Its companions split to either side, attempting to flank their target. Bran met the attack with surprising agility. Its body contracted, then expanded explosively, releasing a controlled burst of crystal sludge directly at the airborne Raptorine. The predator tried to evade, but in the confined space of the chamber, its aerial maneuverability was compromised. The sludge caught its left wing, instantly crystallizing and sending the Raptorine crashing into a processing tank. The flanking Raptorines hesitated, reassessing their approach. One advanced cautiously, the other circled wider, clearly targeting Arya. Bran reacted instantly to the threat, extending a massive appendage to block the path to Arya while simultaneously confronting the closer attacker. The Kradrax's body luminescence intensified to near-blinding levels, creating disorienting patterns that seemed to confuse the Raptorine's vision. Taking advantage of the distraction, Arya accessed the chamber's control panel, initiating an emergency humidity increase. The already misty environment grew even more saturated, visibility dropping to mere meters. The Raptorines, with their reliance on visual hunting, squawked in frustration. The Kradrax, however, seemed to draw strength from the increased moisture. Its movements became faster, more fluid, as if the very air was energizing its crystalline structure. It advanced on the nearest Raptorine with terrible purpose, appendages extended into crystalline spikes. The fight that followed was like nothing Arya had ever witnessed, a brutal ballet of evolutionary adaptations. The Raptorine's speed and slashing attacks against the Kradrax's resilience and crystal manipulation. Under normal circumstances, the outcome might have been uncertain. But these were not normal circumstances. Bran was fighting on advantageous terrain, empowered by the saturated atmosphere. And perhaps more importantly, it was fighting not just for survival, but for something new, something it had discovered in its brief time with Arya: protection, connection, purpose beyond mere existence. The nearest Raptorine fell first, its cybernetic enhancements short-circuiting under the relentless moisture, its body encased in rapidly expanding crystal formations. The second, seeing its companion defeated, attempted retreat, only to be caught by a whip-like appendage that dragged it back into the fray. The lead Raptorine, having freed itself from the initial crystal encasement, launched a desperate final attack. It propelled itself directly at Bran's wounded side, the injury not fully healed despite the creature's remarkable recovery. Arya saw the danger too late. "Bran!" she cried out in warning. The Kradrax turned, but not quickly enough to avoid the Raptorine's talons. They struck the vulnerable area, reopening the wound in a spray of phosphorescent fluid. Bran emitted a keening cry of pain that echoed throughout the chamber. But instead of retreating, the Kradrax seized the opportunity created by the Raptorine's proximity. It engulfed the predator in a massive appendage, drawing it closer despite the continued slashing of those deadly talons. Then, with a surge of effort that sent light cascading across its entire body, Bran released what could only be described as a concentrated burst of crystal energy directly into the Raptorine's body. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Crystal formations erupted from within the predator, bursting through feathers and cybernetics alike. The Raptorine's scream cut off abruptly as its body contorted, overtaken by the crystallization process from the inside out. Within seconds, what had been a fearsome predator was now a grotesque statue, a twisted monument to the Kradrax's desperate defense. The chamber fell silent except for the constant hum of the processing units and the soft patter of moisture condensing on surfaces. Bran slumped, clearly exhausted by the massive expenditure of energy. Its wound was bleeding freely again, the phosphorescent fluid pooling beneath it. Arya rushed to its side, medical supplies already in hand. "Hold on," she urged, applying pressure to the injury. "Just hold on." The Kradrax's luminescence flickered weakly, but its eyes remained fixed on her, conveying what she could only interpret as gratitude. The moment of connection was interrupted by the chamber's access hatch sliding open once more. Arya tensed, expecting more Raptorines, or perhaps station security coming to finish what the predators had started. Instead, a single figure entered cautiously, a young man in maintenance coveralls, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. Echo. Arya recognized the junior technician who worked under the distribution director. "What are you doing here?" "Helping you," he replied, approaching slowly, eyes fixed on the wounded Kradrax. "I saw what happened with the security officers, and I saw you leading this thing here. I've been monitoring the environmental controls, helping with the humidity increase." Arya stared at him in confusion. "Why would you help us?" Echo's gaze dropped to the floor. "Because you saved my mother last year, during the ventilation failure in Residential Section 8. You didn't have to risk yourself to get her out, but you did." He looked up, meeting Arya's eyes. "I figured I owed you one." Before Arya could respond, the station-wide comm system activated again. "Attention all personnel. Raptorine retreat confirmed. Repeat. Raptorine retreat confirmed. Damage assessment teams report to your designated sections. Medical teams stand by for casualty reports." Echo glanced at the crystallized Raptorines. "I think we know why they retreated." Arya nodded, still applying pressure to Bran's wound. "But we still have a problem. Security knows about Bran now. They'll be hunting for both of us." "Maybe not," Echo said thoughtfully. The attack caused significant damage to the security systems. Data logs, surveillance records. A lot was lost. If we can get your friend here somewhere safe before they reorganize." A new voice interrupted from the chamber entrance. "That won't be necessary." Arya's heart sank as she turned to see Distribution Director Valeria Knox standing in the doorway, flanked by several station personnel. Unlike the security officers earlier, they weren't visibly armed, but their presence was no less threatening. "Director," Arya acknowledged, unconsciously positioning herself between the newcomers and the wounded Kradrax. Valeria approached slowly, her gaze moving from the crystallized Raptorines to Bran and finally to Arya. "When my son disappeared from his post during an attack, I suspected he might be involved in something unauthorized. I didn't expect this." Echo stepped forward. "Mother, I can explain." She silenced him with a raised hand. "The explanation is clear enough. Ecological engineer Solen harbored an apex creature on my station, putting everyone at risk." Her eyes narrowed. "And yet, that same creature appears to have neutralized the Raptorine threat more effectively than our own defenses could." Arya straightened, finding courage in desperation. "Bran saved us. The Raptorines were tracking it. Yes, but once they arrived, it fought to protect the station. To protect me." "Bran?" Valeria raised an eyebrow. "You named it?" "He needed a name," Arya replied simply. The director studied the wounded Kradrax, which was watching the interaction with evident intelligence despite its weakened state. "Our protocols regarding apex creatures are absolute. They're classified as extreme threats, to be eliminated on sight. Protocols written by people who never bothered to understand these beings," Arya countered. "Bran isn't just a mindless predator. He's intelligent, capable of communication, of forming bonds. He protected me, protected all of us." Valeria was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Finally," she said, "the Raptorine attacks have been increasing in frequency and severity. Our defenses are inadequate, our resources dwindling. If word spread that Thera 7 was under the protection of a Kradrax..." Hope flickered in Arya's chest. "The Raptorines would avoid the station. They'd find easier targets elsewhere." "Perhaps," the director conceded. "But there's still the matter of station security. The creature, Bran, cannot remain within the inhabited sections." "The Crystal Belt," Echo suggested suddenly. "The outer rings where the harvesting drones operate. It's close enough to the station for Bran to maintain a presence that would deter Raptorines, but far enough to satisfy security concerns." Valeria considered this, then nodded slowly. "A compromise might be possible. But first, we need to be certain this Kradrax truly poses no threat to the station." As if understanding the conversation, Bran stirred, its body luminescence forming patterns that Arya had come to recognize as communication. With visible effort, the creature extended an appendage toward the director, stopping just short of contact, a gesture of peace, of offering. Valeria stared at the extended appendage, her professional detachment momentarily giving way to wonder. "Remarkable," she murmured. "He won't harm the station," Arya assured her. "He could have escaped during the Raptorine attack, abandoned us to save himself. Instead, he stayed and fought." The director straightened, her decision made. "Very well. Engineer Solen, you will take responsibility for this creature. You will establish a habitat in the outer rings, monitor its activities, and ensure it poses no threat to station operations. At the first sign of aggressive behavior toward personnel or infrastructure, termination protocols will be implemented. Is that understood?" Arya nodded quickly, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Yes, Director. Completely understood." "As for the security breach," Valeria continued, "given the exceptional circumstances and the role this Kradrax played in repelling the Raptorine attack, I am prepared to overlook certain protocol violations. The official record will show that an apex creature temporarily sought refuge on the station during the attack, then departed once the threat was neutralized." Relief washed over Arya like a physical force. "Thank you, Director." Valeria's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet. Engineer, you've taken on a significant responsibility. The success or failure of this arrangement rests entirely on your shoulders. I understand, Arya assured her. But I believe in Bran, and I believe this could be the beginning of something important, not just for the station, but for our understanding of the apex creatures themselves. The director nodded, then turned to address the personnel who had accompanied her. Prepare a transport module for outer ring deployment. Medical team, assist Engineer Solen with the creature's injuries. The rest of you, begin cleanup and containment of these remains. She gestured to the crystallized raptorines. As the group dispersed to carry out their orders, Echo approached Arya. You actually did it, he said, amazement evident in his voice. You changed station policy on apex creatures. Not entirely, Arya cautioned. This is a trial, an exception, but it's a start. She turned her attention back to Bran, whose luminescence had brightened noticeably, following the director's decision. Through their developing communication system, the Kradrax conveyed a complex mix of gratitude, relief, and something Arya could only interpret as affection. We're going to find you a new home, she told it softly. Close enough that we can still see each other, but with more space than a storage compartment. Bran's response was a gentle pulse of light that seemed to envelop her, like an embrace. 3 days later, Arya stood on the observation deck of Outer Ring 7, watching as Bran glided through the crystal formations that surrounded Thera 7. The Kradrax's wound had healed remarkably once proper medical attention was provided, leaving only a faint discoloration on its crystalline hide. More surprising was the transformation in the creature's behavior. Rather than immediately returning to the depths of the crystal belt, Bran had established a territory that encompassed the station's outer perimeter. Each day, it made regular circuits of this self-appointed domain, its powerful presence a clear message to any would-be predators. And the message was being received. Long-range sensors had detected Raptorine craft approaching the sector twice since Bran's relocation, but each time, they had altered course upon detecting the Kradrax's distinctive energy signature. The word is spreading, Echo observed, joining Arya at the viewport. The Raptorines are learning that this station has powerful protection. Arya nodded, watching as Bran executed a graceful turn around a crystal formation, its body luminescence creating patterns that were visible even at a distance. It's more than protection, she said softly. It's a relationship, mutual benefit. We provide a safe haven, occasional supplements to its diet. In return, Bran keeps the predators away. And you get to continue your research, Echo added with a knowing smile. It was true. Director Valeria had approved Arya's proposal for a formal study of Kradrax biology and behavior, with Bran as the primary subject. The knowledge gained could potentially revolutionize their understanding of the apex creatures, and perhaps lead to similar arrangements with other stations throughout the Dead Belt. I never thought sharing my rations with a wounded predator would lead to all this, Arya admitted. Compassion has a way of creating unexpected outcomes, Echo replied. My mother would never admit it, but I think she's impressed by what you've accomplished. In the distance, Bran completed its patrol circuit and approached the observation deck. It hovered before the viewport, eyes fixed on Arya, body luminescence forming the pattern she had come to recognize as a greeting. Arya raised her hand in response, palm pressed against the transparent barrier that separated them. Hello, friend, she said, knowing the Kradrax couldn't hear her words, but would understand the gesture. Bran's luminescence intensified briefly, acknowledgement, connection, before it turned and glided back into the crystal field. A silent guardian returning to its vigil. Word of the Kradrax that protected Thera 7 spread quickly through the Dead Belt. Spacers and miners shared stories of the station where humans and an apex creature had formed an unprecedented alliance, where no Raptorine dared to hunt. Some dismissed the tales as space lane myths, the kind of folklore that inevitably arose in the isolation of deep space. Others, particularly those who had witnessed Brand's protective patrols firsthand, spoke of a new understanding, a potential shift in the relationship between humans and the beings they shared the galaxy with. As for Arya, she continued her work on the station, dividing her time between ecological engineering duties and her ongoing research with Bran. Each day brought new discoveries, new insights into Kradrak's intelligence and social structures. And each day strengthened the bond between them, a connection that transcended species barriers, that had begun with a simple act of compassion in a time of desperate need. In the vast, dangerous expanse of the Dead Belt, where resources were scarce and survival never guaranteed, Thera 7 had become something unique, a place where cooperation replaced conflict, where understanding fostered protection, and where an act of kindness toward a wounded predator had created a sanctuary no enemy dared to challenge. 3 weeks after Bran's relocation to the Outer Rings, the long-awaited supply freighter finally arrived. As Arya supervised the distribution of fresh rations to the station's personnel, she set aside a special package, nutrient-dense provisions specifically formulated based on her research into Kradrak's dietary needs. Later, as she delivered the package to Bran in its Crystal Belt territory, she reflected on how much had changed since that fateful day in the lower distribution bay. The wounded, vulnerable creature she had found was now a powerful guardian, respected and even admired by many on the station. And she, once just another anonymous engineer maintaining systems, had become a pioneer in xenobiology, her research already attracting attention from scientific communities beyond the Dead Belt. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said as Bran consumed the specialized rations with evident appreciation. The Kradrax's response was a complex pattern of luminescence that Arya had learned to interpret as agreement, tinged with contentment. In the distance, the crystal formations of the belt glinted in the light of the distant star, while behind them, Thera 7's structures stood solid and secure, a human outpost in an inhospitable region, protected not by weapons or shields, but by the presence of a creature that had once been considered its natural enemy. Arya smiled as Bran finished its meal and moved closer, its massive form surprisingly gentle as it positioned itself beside her. Together, they gazed out at the vastness of space, two different species united by shared purpose and mutual respect. In a galaxy defined by conflict and competition for resources, they had discovered something precious, that compassion could bridge the greatest divides, that understanding could transform enemies into allies, and that sometimes the most powerful protection came not from force, but from friendship. As Bran's luminescence created patterns that seemed to mirror the distant stars, Arya knew with certainty that their story was just beginning, and that its ripples would extend far beyond this remote station at the edge of the Dead Belt. For now, though, it was enough to stand together in peaceful companionship, human and apex creature, former strangers now bound by a connection that had begun with a simple offering of rations to a wounded predator, a small act of kindness that had changed everything.